Welcome back to the Vandy Sports Podcast. I'm Joey Dwyer, here to analyze and make sense of a week that's felt like chaos for Vanderbilt and Jerry Stackhouse in particular. A few days ago, rumors started flying that Dwayne Casey, the Pistons head coach, would take his talents to the front office and step down as head coach. And a few days later on Sunday, that amounted to something for sure. Casey is now in the Pistons front office and the head coaching job is wide open. Even before it actually came to fruition, Stackhouse's name was firmly in the mix, at least in terms of Vanderbilt circle. Stackhouse's name was in the mix. So here to make sense of all that, break down whether Stackhouse would be interested, kind of how he fits as the Pistons coach, whether the Pistons would actually make a move there with him, and how it would affect Vanderbilt if that went down. But first, wanted to preface this with some news that was broken on the board this morning. Chris broke that Adam Mazzari, Vanderbilt assistant coach, is going to leave Vanderbilt and go to Cal. So obviously some big news there, and news that I will preface by saying I don't think is entirely connected with Stackhouse's move to the Pistons. I think that's a bit of a reach to say, well, Mazzari's leaving, so obviously Stackhouse is gone as well. I think we have to preface it with saying that those were probably independent decisions. So I think that is a loss for Vanderbilt, and we'll get into that more at some point. But right now, probably not, just because Stackhouse is taking the Pistons job. So I'll say that first, but going into the potential fit of this job, it makes a lot of sense. And it makes a lot of sense as to why Vanderbilt people, in terms of message boards and fans, are connecting Stackhouse with the Pistons. It feels like it is a match made in heaven in terms of if Stack were to get an NBA coaching job, it'd probably be this one. Dwayne Casey, guy who was just the Pistons coach, now in the front office, had Stack on his staff in Stack's first year as an NBA coach. Stackhouse and him seem to have maintained a good relationship. Stack said after the Tennessee game that buzzer beater that was drawn up for Tyron Lawrence, that was a Dwayne Casey play. He stole it from his back pocket, and obviously it worked for him, and now it feels like that connection might be more valuable than ever if Stackhouse is able to get that job. Looking at it in terms of a basketball perspective, Stackhouse has a track record of player development, or at least an assumed track record of player development. I think he has a strong case that he might be the guy to develop a guy like Jaden Ivey or a guy like Isaiah Stewart. One of the youngest teams in the league will also have a top 5 pick. Stackhouse's record of player development could come in handy there, and it's a guy who's probably capable of managing NBA locker room as well. Stackhouse has been in those locker rooms. He knows how to manage egos. Just feels like maybe he might be better suited even as an NBA coach than a college coach. And I know he likes working with young people, but the NBA doesn't have some of the challenges that Vanderbilt fans think that Stackhouse has. A lot of the recruiting stuff that Vanderbilt fans have had exceptions with, Stackhouse is not going to have to deal with that in the NBA. And the defensive-minded approach that Stackhouse takes to coaching, I think, could also be something that the Pistons really like. That's a city that's a blue-collar city, and a lot of those great Pistons teams from years ago are built on defense, are built on a track record of toughness. Stackhouse also runs good offensive stuff as well. So obviously feels like he's a guy who could be suited to run an NBA team, and particularly a young NBA team. He likes working with young people. That's a team that has a lot of them. So not lobbying for Stackhouse to get that job, but just saying there's connections there, and that job seems to make a lot of sense for him if the Pistons feel he's worthy. But right now it feels like the Pistons don't have as much interest as maybe you'd think. They've interviewed, well, they haven't interviewed, but Adrian Wojnarowski put out a candidate list, had a few assistant coaches, had guys like Chris Quinn, had Ime Udoka on it, and also had a few other assistants. Stackhouse wasn't listed on that. Maybe he's in the among others. Maybe he gets an interview eventually, but right now doesn't seem like he's quite at the top of the Pistons list in terms of where they're looking, but Stackhouse is certainly a name that you want to keep an eye on there, and I think he would take an NBA coaching job if given the opportunity. And I think we all know that most coaches probably their end goal isn't to stay at Vanderbilt. That's maybe not a succinctly stepping stone job, but a job that can get you to other places. And it feels like Stackhouse probably wants to get to an NBA job. Feels like that's kind of been his goal, and the next step in his career is that he wants an NBA job. Will he stay at Vanderbilt because there's unfinished business? Maybe, but you probably think that he wants to take that job, and that job is maybe even better suited for him than a Vanderbilt is. So a lot of questions in terms of whether Stackhouse would take that job or not, but it feels like he'd certainly be interested and would certainly take a hard look at it. There's more earning potential in that job, maybe a better fit, and is ultimately where it seems like he wants to be long term, is in the NBA. Vanderbilt is a fine job. It's a job that he's starting to embrace a little bit more, starting to take the next step in, it feels like, get his program towards the NCAA tournament. But if the NBA comes calling, I don't know how many college coaches are going to turn him down. It'd be very, very few college coaches that would turn the NBA down, and I don't think Stackhouse would be one of those guys, especially if it's a team that he's played for, a team that fits him so well. So a lot to break down here. I think the bigger question here is whether the Pistons would take Stackhouse rather than whether he would take the job. I think Stackhouse does want that job a lot, and the Pistons do seem to have maybe a level of interest, but not a level of interest enough at this point to be incredibly concerned as to whether Stackhouse will bolt for the NBA right now. So I'd say have moderate worry right now. Maybe don't freak out and say Stackhouse is gone, the program is in shambles. I think a lot of the concerns of whether they've made an effort in the transfer portal have been overblown. They've reached out to 30 guys. They'll have 2 official visitors this week. I reported a few days ago that they had an in-home with Will Shaver, also have had in-homes with a few other guys. So there's effort there. Maybe it's from his assistants, but Vanderbilt's not completely neglecting the portal here, and I think that's something to note for sure. Obviously, things haven't been trending in a positive direction, but to say Stackhouse has no interest in recruiting the portal this year, when he said in the offseason or in the final game that we're going to be as active as anyone, I think would be a little off to say that. I think it'd be a little off to say he's not making an effort. They're recruiting, at least in terms of volume, at the highest level that they've recruited before. They haven't landed the guys yet, but they're certainly making an effort, and I don't think that you can say that Stackhouse is completely neglecting it this offseason. So it's really, really interesting to see kind of how this all plays out. But one thing's for sure, if Stackhouse takes this job, this would be maybe the worst time possible for him to take that job at this point in the hiring cycle. When Pat Kelsey has signed an extension, when Dusty May has signed an extension, when all the mid-major guys seem to have head coaching jobs at high majors, if they're worthy of having one, he's like, Vanderbilt's going to have to reach on a candidate or go with a candidate that wants this job badly or is familiar with this job, at least to a high enough level to where they want this job. Maybe it's an assistant, maybe it's a mid-major guy who didn't get looks from other Power Fives or at least didn't get jobs there. It feels like this would be maybe the worst possible timing for Vanderbilt if Stackhouse were to bolt. So for Vanderbilt, I think the hope is that Stackhouse stays, obviously, and that this doesn't affect their portal recruiting too badly, because it feels like what could happen is the Michigan head coaching job in football, where recruits don't want to go there because they're scared Harbaugh is going to bolt for the NFL at any time. Vanderbilt, I think, could avoid that if this doesn't get out of hand, but if this gets out of hand in terms of Stackhouse taking an interview and not getting it, things could certainly get dicey here. I just wanted to come on and make sense of this whole thing. So I think the bigger concern for Stackhouse is whether the Pistons actually offer it to him. I think he'd probably take it, though, if it was offered. So just want to come on, break things down quickly. Didn't want to share too much or break any crazy stories. Just want to come at it from an analyst perspective. And I think there's only so much you can say, but certainly some smoke at this point, and certainly something worth watching here. In all likelihood, I don't even want to say that. I can't make a prediction here. Maybe Jerry Stackhouse is Vanderbilt's coach in a few months. Maybe he's in Detroit in 2 weeks. We'll see, though, and I think right now you want to moderate your risk and moderate your concern because he hasn't got an interview yet. He's not on the initial coaching list. I think a lot's going to have to happen for Stackhouse to get that job and to leave Vanderbilt at this point. So I appreciate you guys watching. God bless, and we'll have any updates on Stack and his job security. Maybe not his job security, but in terms of whether he gets that job or whether he's interviewing for that job. We'll have it updated on VandySports.com, have it updated on here. Appreciate you guys watching again, and God bless. Peace.